Let's go straight into the company that sells the product that's sitting on the desk here in front of which is Coca-Cola. So Coke is a sizable global corporation that owns and licenses 500 non-alcoholic beverage brands. Okay, so they started off in the 1890s with Coca-Cola, and then of course it has all sorts of iterations, things like Diet Coke, Coke Light, Fanta, Sprite, but remember it's also a huge player in waters. So you'll be familiar with brands like Bon Aqua and Sani and the likes, juice drinks, Minute Maid and the likes, and a whole lot of other energy and sports drinks. Market capitalization, $177.56 billion. It's in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. It's a big player. Price earnings ratio, pretty standard for US market, 25.12. Solid dividend yield too, 3.38. Let's go straight to the share chart because that shows you that over 5 years it's been a good performer. Although since the middle of 2016, it's gone a little bit off the boil. So this whole thing about sugar being bad for you, because of course there's a lot of sugar in the main beverage, Coke, doesn't seem to be having any impact on the share price.
Yeah, and look, I think this company has been remarkably clever and remarkably successful. And you just pointed out 500 different drinks in there. So they're covering every single base. So yes, if the sugary drinks particularly take a hit, then they'll probably be compensated to a certain extent at least by the waters and things like that. And drinks which are often seen to be relatively healthy.
Right, so the water area, obviously there's straight up water, right? Bottled water, which I assume's got excellent margins because provided people believe that it's clean, the stuff that comes out of the tap in most parts of the world is not recommended for public consumption. That's for washing your hands and flushing the toilet. It's not for drinking. Anyway, that seems to be the general drift. Bottled water, even though it comes from all sorts of places, sometimes it's recycled municipal water, sometimes it's out of the mountain, sometimes it's like reverse osmosis seawater. No one seems to care. As long as it's bottled, we're good. Yeah. That stuff has got tremendous margins, and one can only imagine it's going to sell like, it's going out of business in the years to come. People are exercising. Bottled water has got a very bright future.
Yeah, and what we're talking about here, Paul, is a brand. Okay, so Coca-Cola had been around for over 100 years. People know, understand, and trust that brand. It's a promise made and a promise kept. So whether it's the Coke brand itself or whether it's the water, doesn't actually matter. If it's in that stable, people know it and trust it and are going to stay with it. There's a huge loyalty factor in this.
Yeah. Okay, as far as Coke's concerned, so it's important to note that they typically don't own the bottling operations. They make the syrup and then they supply that to bottlers, and they're quite selective about who they appoint as bottlers. Just explain what's happened here in Africa with SABCO and ABI and SAB Miller and AB InBev and Coca-Cola.
Yeah, what happened about 2 years ago, in fact, you saw SAB Miller rationalizing its Coca-Cola distribution operation in the whole of Africa. And it got the buy-in of one of the largest Coke bottlers in the country, the Gucci family, down in Port Elizabeth, I think it was. So now...
So that was SABCO, is the name?
That was SABCO, that's quite correct.
So they consolidated their operations with SABCO in order to form a very, very big Coke bottler in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa and some other places.
That's quite good. And that has meant that now you've got this incredibly formidable force.
But have they not been obliged to sell that? And who have they sold that to? Or is that in AB InBev now?
For the time being, I think it's an AB InBev.
Okay.
But this now raises a very, very interesting dynamic because AB InBev has always been very closely associated with Pepsi Cola. Okay, on the other hand.
Okay.
But funnily enough, they're also, or should I say, one of their biggest investors, 3G Capital, is very closely associated with Warren Buffett, who in turn is one of Coke's biggest investors, you see. So again, there's a bit of a conflict here.
So there's talk that perhaps what the 3G guys, who are the powerful Brazilian private equity group behind AB InBev, might put to Coca-Cola shareholders, including Mr. Buffett, the idea of a consolidation of the two groups. If that were to come to pass, would that be something that would be approved by regulators, for example? I mean, is there any reason to think it would be problematic?
Comes back to your original point, and that is that you've got this huge franchising network all around the world. So you probably find that you don't get too much overlap in many of these countries. So
at the end of the day, it's beverages. So like if you drink the one, you drink the other. Why not?
Yes.
There could be great synergies from rationalizing distribution infrastructure
From a
at the
cost
back end.
perspective, absolutely. From a regulation perspective, maybe not quite so easy, but I wouldn't have thought it's going to be a deal breaker.
Okay, on its own merits though, what do you think about Coke? Because we've got the concerns that people want to stop drinking so much of this stuff because, sugar is not great for you. Even kids are getting a lot of heat from their parents. That's not such a great idea. But your sense is that the corporation can just shift and change its product mix. Would you be buying the stock at the moment? Do you think it's a hot outlook? The share price reflects quite some movement, but a bit of a sort of a sell-off in the late stages.
Yeah, it's a bit high, Paul. We're talking 25 times PE. Bit pricey. The company is undoubtedly mature. So, it's a little bit difficult to see where you're going to get the growth coming from. One of the problems...
That's a good point, because unlike many other global brands, these guys are all over the place already.
And one of the problems, one of the biggest markets is Mexico. Now, looking at what's happened in the past few days with Mr. Trump's accession to the position of President of the United States, President-elect, and his position with regard to Mexico, that could be slightly problematic, at least in the short term.
And you're right, Mexico's got astonishing Coca-Cola consumption rates. I don't know what's going on there with those people. Right, so it sounds as though we're going to lean not hot on Coke. Maybe a little bit elevated.
Great company, but
too much fizz there.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, let's go with not hot. Right.